Hey guys, welcome to another installment of the 706 Podcast, the podcast in which we attempt to determine week by week the 706 greatest films ever made. Big screen, small screen.
Just big screen.
Well, true, yeah. So as always,
we have some direct-to-DVD stuff. I've got some things I could recommend.
Absolutely.
That's a whole new ballgame.
If it's on IMDb, it's valid.
Aladdin 3. That's all I'll say.
Aladdin 3, there you go. So I am your host for the week, Tony. And what are your names?
Hey guys, Kirk here.
Anthony.
I'm Connor.
So this week I brought in a movie by Michael Haneke called Caché or Hidden, which is from, 2006?
2005, I thought?
2005.
It premiered at Con in 2005.
Okay, so originally came out in 2005, maybe it was released a year later, something like that. But yeah, basically there's a film, as I said, by Michael Haneke, and it's I guess a drama, you could call it. It's probably the best way to describe it, but before we really dig in deep here, I'm just going to go around the table and get kind of the first impressions. Kirk, do you want to go first, or do you want to wait a minute?
You guys can go.
You want me to go? Or?
Yeah, sure, you can go, Anthony, if you're okay with that.
That's fine. I mean, I'll start by just saying that this is the third time I've seen this movie, and the last time I saw it was around November, so a few months ago. So it's not too immediate in my mind, but I guess maybe still relatively fresh, depending on how you look at it. And I've talked to Tony about this movie before, and in both the first and second time, I kind of expect this movie going in, just given the aura and the director and the reputation it had, that there's not going to be an easy answer, and it's certainly a very think-heavy movie. But I was always curious to see what people thought about the mystery, about the ideas of the tapes. And each time I watched this, though, I thought it was kind of interesting that mystery of the tapes just became more and more, how do I put this, more and more just uninteresting to me. I'm more fascinated by the scenes around it and the idea of how do we look at the conscious when it's guilty, or when when people perceive it to be guilty. And so I'm more interested in, I guess, the metaphors and the symbolisms that are created around this 1961 Paris massacre. And that to me is actually where I have a slight problem with the movie and how it develops and critiques that sort of that reaction. I mean, my knowledge of that incident is, as a foreigner, obviously not from France, and obviously, pretty distant and third hand. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a problem of a non-American watching like Do the Right Thing. I just don't understand these Algerian French relations. But I mean, I do have some concerns there. But that's pretty much how I regard the movie now. I mean, yeah.
Well, you know me, I'm the history guy. And what I find very interesting about this is that, and I don't really know much about Algeria and France. I'm sure there's a lot of background it would be helpful to know, but I find interesting with this movie is that it really just kind of teases the sort of the historical element to the plot. It's kind of the thing where it's mostly about, really the domestic, the bourgeois, the inside of the house, what's going on. And that only kind of barely intersects with real history and real diplomatic things going on and real kind of grander things. And the way that each individual is tied up in those things is very complicated. It's not what we kind of would expect to see in a movie. And I find it very interesting. I find that a very cool thing that the movie does. I think this movie is truly naturalistic in that respect. It's trying to show life kind of like the way it really is. And as for the tape, I'm not really talking about my enjoyment of the movie and getting right into the themes, but as for the tape, it's interesting because it's so ambiguous what it's all about. We don't get any answers about the tapes, where they're from, and of course I think this is kind of like a thing about film. Film holds us accountable somehow for what we do. We have to examine what we do, even in our own home, and interrogate our own thoughts and what we do.
The idea of objectivity. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I'm grasping for words myself, but I find it really, really interesting. And as for the movie, this movie's pretty dry. This movie has some really long shots. Yeah. I was just trying to puzzle it out while I was watching it, and I enjoyed it for that reason. And I find it intellectually gratifying. And this is my first time watching it in full. I had watched it a little bit before, I watched part of it. I think Tony was watching it, and I fell asleep during it. But I'm glad I got to watch it. I was very tired.
Is this
glad
your
I
first
got to watch
Hanukkah?
it. I'm not sure. Have I seen
White
Funny
Ribbon?
Games?
You said.
I've seen White Ribbon. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, White Ribbon is the only one I think I've seen. I think Funny Games I've just talked about with Tony, but
It's a very
I haven't
discussable
seen it.
movie.
Yeah,
They're all
yeah.
discussable. That's
Yeah.
what he does. Yeah. So,
And how about Kirk?
how you feeling, Kirk?
I'm fine. I can tell, these my fellow hosts are sort of expecting some sort of implosion. On
Kirk
behalf,
looked very distraught when we
this-
ended the movie.
I was not expecting anything.
This is a Tony movie. This is a movie that someone that's in film school probably has wet dreams over. It's something that is very, very, very hard to parse out, and it's not anything I want to parse out. It's something I want to forget about. I feel like there's really no point for us to be doing this podcast less than 20 minutes after we watch this movie. If it is as deep, if it is as mysterious and enigmatic as the director purports it to be, then why the fuck are we filming this right now? We should be doing this in a week, right?
Could have said that about a lot of our episodes.
For sure, yeah.
No, but this is supposed to be like
I don't think it's different than any
2001
other movie.
meets Pulp Fiction. I mean, this is the director asking us, well, what does red taste like? Oh, you don't know? Haha, fuck you.
Well,
No, I hate this movie. I don't like it. I like the first 40% of it, and then it started to drain on me. It started to really drain me, excuse me, and there are so many shots that are so long and they're just so boring, and I know it's meant to play on like the banality of it all and the private life versus the public life, and trying, what like Connor said, to get us into a naturalistic sense of observation. But I really can't be bothered. I think this movie could have been 80 minutes. As it stands, it's 2 hours. I really think a lot of these shots were just too much. They're cool shots, They're like, it's like a trick shot compilation, but it really, I don't know. I know I'm supposed to be I'm supposed to be asking who made the tapes, but I really don't care. I just don't.
I don't think you have to care.
I don't think he actually
Yeah.
wants you to ask that. I think
Yeah.
that's
Really, I think he finds himself titillated by the idea that people don't know, and all these articles that have been, and think pieces that have been written, and all of his responses, which seem very calculated. The idea, I read a quote, the idea that I like the audience to not have all the answers to the questions I put forth, and I like to play more on what's not there than what is, in negative space. And it's like, those seem very much thought of, when he was alone editing this movie in post-production. What am I going to say?
Kirk always assumes that it's just random crap and they figured it out.
No, I'm not saying it's random. I'm saying it's definitely calculated.
No, I mean,
but it's calculated crap is what it is, and I think that's it's a sign of commission rather than ineptitude.
I don't understand. Calculated, like what? Aside from you just not liking the movie, what do you mean calculated crap? What is the crap?
The shots were
calculated?
far too long. There was probably about 35 minutes of dead silence in this movie. And that's far too much.
In
that's
your defense,
far too
I mean,
much.
the director does say when he created this, his goal was to, quote, rape the audience, end quote. But let's stop with our interpretation. Let's get the idea of the movie.
I just want to say, first of all, I'm worried that there's this perception being created that I'm like, when I pitch these movies, I'm like, oh, this is gonna freak them out, or they won't know what to do with this. I really want you to enjoy this movie. I thought it was interesting. I think it's very interesting and discussable. I didn't want to like blow anyone's mind here. I just thought it was an interesting movie that I personally like. I just wanted to defend myself initially. And also, I've been in your shoes. I really have. There are like very respected like art movies, like the movie Taste of Cherry by Abbas Kiarostami, which won the Palme d'Or in, I think it's a 90s movie, but I watched that movie and it is the dullest thing I have ever seen. I just do not get it at all. There's just nothing about that movie that I find interesting or gratifying intellectually, emotionally. It's just a nothing. It's pure negative space, as you said.
Is this considered an art movie?
This, I would say it's an art movie, sure. Why not? I mean, it's not like as abstract as some other movies, but I would put it in that category. And for me, like, my own history with this movie is I watched it in high school after seeing Ebert's review, and it sounded very tantalizing by how he described it. And I got it from the library, and I watched it in my bedroom in the dark at night, which I think watching this is a movie that really works watching it on a laptop, which I don't often say. Mm-hmm. There's something about watching this on a laptop at night with headphones that really just puts you in that space, in the mood he's creating. And I had never seen anything like it before. I was so transfixed by this movie. I found it so interesting. And I'd never seen anything like it, and it just became kind of a touchstone for me to describe other things, and I kept going back to this. And also, I've been in your shoes with some of this guy's other movies, because this is a guy who, he's very much like...
Very smug.
There's a smugness to it, yes. And he has kind of an antagonistic relationship with the audience. Like, if you've seen Funny Games, you know what it's all about. It's sort of, it's like playing on the home invasion thriller genre, like horror exploitation movie thing. It basically starts off as like a conventional one of these movies, but becomes like a version that's actively like chiding you. Like, people break the fourth wall and tell you, why are you watching this movie? What's wrong with you? And it's like, for me, some people like that movie. For me, that's infuriating. I cannot stand it. I find it the most insufferable
I think it's
crap.
pretty deep.
But that's also a movie that's egging you on to watch it, as opposed to like this, which I understand for Kirk is very easy to just kind of see that opening shot of a still image and be like, what the hell? Just
actually, I was fine with the opening image because it had a purpose for me. It was, you're watching the tape looking for clues as with the couple. You were, and then I was very much engaged, and I thought it was well acted. This movie's very well acted. I guess the shot I take the most, probably like the bedroom shot where he's discussing. He just comes back. Spoilers. He comes back from his, kind of his foil in this movie kills himself. And he tells her like 3 times that he killed. We're very much meant to know that it's important that he killed himself, which obviously we don't need them telling us that. But anyways, the scene itself is very long and it's just daunting. I mean, it's not pretty. It's dark. It's poorly lit, which I know is on purpose. Everything's on purpose. And then also the scene where the little kid gets taken away at the end is like 3 minutes too long, in my opinion.
You talking about the very end?
Yeah.
Where the kid
not
gets...
the last.
Oh, not the last shot.
Where the kid in the flashback.
Oh, yeah, that is very long, yes. I would agree. That's a bit long.
If this actor, if this director, if this is his style, then... good for him, I mean, it's too much for me. I don't like to feel like I'm completely inept at watching a movie, and I didn't feel that way for about 40% of the movie, and then it just kind of went off the rails for me.
So now you say the first 40% of the movie. So is it like you were kind of like, you were intrigued by the premise, and you were like, "Okay, where is this going to go?" Is that
I thought it was going to be kind of a typical thriller, and then it developed into a treatise or kind of a postulation on morality, or just it developed into more of a philosophical bent. It had a philosophical bent to it, whereas in the first 40%, it felt very much like I guess I feel like he grabbed me with the suspense, the fear, right? The paranoia of not knowing why or how or who is recording, your private lives, and then on the last 40% or last 60% or whatever, I feel like he took that initial enthrallment illusion, my illusionment with the movie, and then he kind of contorted it to tell me a message that I fully don't understand yet. So I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit of it was a little misleading for me personally, but I can't complain too much about this movie. It's just, I don't know.
No, it wasn't. I get it. No. Well, you're touching on some important points here, actually. Yeah. One thing I like about this movie, and this is a thing a lot of people will really not like about this movie, I'm fully aware, is that it kind of pulls the rug out from under you with anticlimax, which I think is kind of bold and interesting. And there's an element of like, I can get why that would be, annoying to people or like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is really annoying. Like, come on, deliver on your promise. But for me, it's just like, as I said last week, I call this an anti-thriller because it sets up this thriller premise, but he relentlessly just keeps subverting it. Like, it's totally anticlimactic. And like, for instance, the scene you mentioned where Majid kills himself, which to me is an incredible scene. Just one of the most visceral shocks I've seen. Like, the first time I saw it, I could not believe it. My mind was like blown.
It was striking. The CGI didn't hold up.
It works for me. It definitely works for me. And I love that the blood-stain on the wall is the poster and DVD cover for the movie. I think that's the coolest thing. I just love that. Anyway, it's like, oh, that's so cool. But, but that moment is like, the place it is in the runtime of the movie, it's like the payoff. Like, this is what you wanted. This is what you came in for. To me, this is the version of Funny Games that works. Like, this, to me, it works because it works on a visceral level, but it also works within the context of the kind of the themes of the movie, which I'm sure we'll get into soon. But what were your guys' understanding? I'm sure I know you've read about the movie and you've seen it before, so I know you kind of have an idea of kind of what it's all about, and he's been very open about that. If you read interviews by this guy, it's very interesting because on the DVD, there's an interview with him, and he like goes from like, when he's asked questions about the plot of the movie, it's like, it's open to interpretation. It's open to interpretation. He doesn't give you any clues. He doesn't tell you anything. But with the themes of the movie, he's very forward. He's very open with like his intention with this movie, and he's not trying to hide it from you. He wants you to get it, so to speak. It's not a movie that really like. And I will say that when I first saw it, I didn't like get it per se. Like, I was very like, I was just kind of in the grasp, I guess, of the filmmaking and the kind of the style and the attitude. But on rewatches and having read some things, I know kind of where he was coming from. But I'm curious to hear from Connor. What kind of was your read of the movie? I mean, I know you know a bit about it, I'm sure, from other sources. But
I've definitely absorbed a lot from you, probably, and various conversations you've had about this movie that I've been listening to. I think I kind of explained at the beginning my main thematic read. It's just this kind of thing. It's this exploration of like what we keep hidden and our secrets. Now we can be super protective of them, how we kind of need to have these secrets. Yet whenever it starts to come out or people become aware of them, it creates instantly this tension. And this is the thing. This is like kind of the fundamental actual like aspect of drama. What we don't know, what a character doesn't know, what someone it's just this full-on exploration of this one thing that sort of tones down the drama to the very minimum, but then keeps the secret, keeps the hidden thing. So I find it an interesting kind of formal experiment for that reason. As for the themes, I think it's something about getting along in a mixed society and how we can interact with other people, and whether we can keep our lives private completely or whether we have to take responsibility. We don't always feel like we're really responsible for, and no one themselves personally feels responsible for these large structural historical things.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think the kind of the element of the videotape, this is something I did not know because I hadn't seen the whole movie, but the element of the videotape and not knowing who made it, it's kind of like, that's Haneke, that's the filmmaker, that's the
holiday.
That's yeah. And it's just that it's this is the kind of thing that keeps us honest. This is what has to keep us honest. Almost this thing of this medium that can sort of get into our heads and see what we're thinking and see how the individual relates to this whole big thing we see on TV. And what we read about in the newspapers. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Anthony, do you have anything? I think Connor basically got it. He basically got most of the points. Do you have anything kind of to add to that?
It's funny that you can say he got it in a movie like this, as ambiguous.
Yeah.
Well, no, but he said what his intention is. It's open to interpretation, but like this, there's kind of a reading of the movie that's widely accepted, and he basically got the main points of it. I was saying, Anthony, do you have anything really to add?
Yeah, I mean, when I first watched this, I was spoiled because at the time I first saw this, I was studying modern colonial relations, modern in the sense of, after the World War. So France and Algeria were somewhat on my mind. And just since we haven't talked about it real quick, I'll just say the 1961 Paris massacre they reference and briefly discuss is a event that occurred when a party from Algeria was protesting in Paris when the police opened fire and basically killed and still undetermined amount of people. And it wasn't until the late 90s that the government finally admitted to actually instigating these attacks, although they only claimed 40 people when every other source has claimed that number to be much higher. So there's still an element, and to this day, I mean, Algeria and France relationships are still really problematic. In terms of what Connor was saying about the videotape, I find it interesting that this comes out in 2005, so we're still a few years away from the idea of drone surveillance, the idea of constant internet surveillance as we know it, even just a few years later, during the post-Bush years. So, I mean, that's an element I would certainly be curious to hear. I think it holds up on that front. But I just want to go back real quick to what Kirk was saying, because for me, what enthralls me is not, like I said, the mystery of the tapes. It's actually the philosophy that he espouses towards the latter 60%. And that, to me, is, like I was saying in the beginning, somewhat problematic when I really dissect further. But what else, Tony?
Yeah, no, you guys basically got it. They mentioned this incident, and for me, it is about it's also kind of generalizes out to just societies in general, just like the notion of like history and coming to terms with your history and your complicity in society and your history, like America, obviously, tons of stuff, with racism and slavery and all this, and like how responsible is your average Joe for that? Do they bear any responsibility? Can we just say, oh, it's all in the past, as you so often hear, why should we care? Why are we even talking about it? But the obvious counterpoint, what Haneke would say is no, it informs the present, and you are part of it because you benefit from this system that has been established. And this is the issue. What I think is so brilliant about this story is the way it integrates the political element with the personal element of the story. The way this man, in the way he interacts with everyone, seems kind of terrified. Like, he insists he's done nothing wrong, but he really protests too much. Like, you can tell this guy does feel guilty.
Defensive, yeah.
Like, he immediately knows. He knows, we don't know who's sending the tapes, but he has an idea very quickly. This is a thing he's thought about his whole life, but he's unwilling to confront it. He is unwilling to take any real responsibility for it, which is this his essential flaw. This is the basic flaw at the root of his character. And I think what Haneke is trying to say is that we have to acknowledge these things. We have to talk about these things. We have to grapple with it. And there is a meta element, too, and I think they're very cleverly kind of deployed. The notion of the tapes that's about cinema or art, and just the way there are shots in this movie where they go on for a long time, and then we realize that we're watching one of the tapes. We're watching one of the tapes, and we'll pause and we'll rewind, and it's a little cute. It's a little smug maybe, but I think it's pretty cool. I think that's using cinema to forward your themes. I think it's really cool, and it's a meta gesture about it. And also, this is his first film that was shot on digital, which I feel like cannot be a coincidence. I feel like he wanted the movie, and I believe that the tapes we see are shot, I don't know this, but there's no, visually, you cannot distinguish between those and just the shots of just the movie proper. So in a way, this movie is like a tape. It's like he sent us this in the mail, and we have to watch it and kind of grapple with it.
It's like an advancement of blow up, blow out,
Yeah, it's a similar kind of idea.
But taking cinema as a whole,
Yeah, but I think it's very clever, and I think he integrates these elements with a lot of cunning. And you said, so you said that when you really kind of delve into the movie, you find some of these things kind of problematically developed. In what way? What do you take issue with the latter half of the movie?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and admit back to something I said again in the beginning is, I am someone foreign or outside the area of understanding really the conflict there. But what I find, to me, I have a weird issue with the fact that when we finally reveal this thing that's been on his conscience this whole time, is it occurred when he was 6 years old. And I get this idea of establishing the sins of the past, the sins of our previous generations, become issues to contend with in the later. But the idea of making him 6 years old to me, it makes it curious because it makes me think about this guy who is making a mistake. But as a 6-year-old, I feel like it's almost unconscious. Like you said, as a child, I was jealous of this guy. And if you're going to conflate that with purposeful killing, or even if it is an accident, of the Paris massacre, I do find that somewhat of a conflation of an issue that doesn't seem quite comparable.
I think the way that works for me, the way it again, it's kind of a contentious point. It's a little bit provocative on his part,
right?
Because
yeah.
I think we are supposed to say, well, he was 6 years old, like, because that's what he says. He's like, I was 6 years old. What do you expect? Who remembers what they did when they were a kid? But that applies again to like society. Like, it happened in this issue, whatever happened in the past, long before any of us were born or whatever.
It does.
And we can say it's not our fault. It's not my fault. It had nothing to do with me.
It throws morality somewhat out of the window by making him 6. But I find the idea of just placing an entire guilty conscience on one 6-year-old still somewhat of an issue. I mean, it works, I guess, in terms of the movie. For me personally, it doesn't quite develop right.
Yeah. I don't get that. I think it's kind of in a metaphorical way.
It's an interesting choice. Yeah, no, it definitely does. Like, you kind of find out at the end, it's like, no, he's not guilty. Which is interesting because I really, up until like the very end, and really it's that shot where you see Majid taken, to the orphanage or whatever it is, that I was kind of, okay, he is telling the truth. I was worried that our main character was not telling the truth, that he was kind of telling just some euphemism, I told a lie, that he did something worse or I don't know what. But it's interesting. So it's the kind of thing where you don't know whether you can believe him. But more to, I guess I kind of agree with Tony that it's like, it's interesting because he's making the choice of saying, well, you really weren't responsible. The idea being that the current generation is not responsible for the things that happened when they were children, right? But I see absolutely what Anthony's saying, and I think it's a very good kind of counterpoint that really we should ask actually how responsible you are. And I think that's the kind of the movie's point.
And even if we decide he's not responsible, I think Haneke would say, even if that's fine, but he should still go to the guy and say, look, I'm sorry. He should acknowledge what happened. He should say, I realize this messed up your life, and
it affects
sorry.
everyone. I mean, it affects his wife. It affects Majid and his son. It's
Absolutely,
affecting his own son. And we got a great moment of the son and Majid's son interacting at the end to show that these boundaries once set by sending him off to the orphanage are no longer there. The next generation is in fact able to interact.
Yeah.
The
it goes
ending.
on. It goes on, right?
It's a chance for. I mean, it depends on how you want to read that ending. Whether a chance for possible fixing or possible further harm. That's up to us as the viewer to make.
Yeah, well, it was his chance, right? He could have said, "I'm so sorry about your fight." I mean, he does, but he totally does not want to deal with this guy at all. He still is denied. He's learned nothing from this whole experience. And as the movie ends, what I think is so great about the way the story wraps up, the ending is a little more. I don't know if we want to get into that, but the way the story concludes is he goes home from that altercation, having basically made his final decision of the film, the final meaningful decision. He's denied responsibility once again, even after there is literal blood on his hands. And he takes I don't know how long, but he does not go to the cops right away.
Right.
It takes a while to go to the cops because he doesn't even want to deal with it. So if her conscience were clean, presumably he'd just call the cops. But I digress. So after he has this altercation with the son, he goes home. He takes sleeping pills and he goes to bed. So he's taking pills to kind of not forget, but to deal with it. How do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night? So he can't sleep because he has to take these pills. So he literally goes to bed. He wraps the covers around him and goes to sleep, and that's it. That's his life. And his life just goes on. No one, his life isn't really meaningfully affected. There are various other hints of things going on in his personal life, but by and large, he can go on living his comfortable life.
It's also the one time we don't see books around him. So I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, he's surrounded by books. I think it's important. This is a cultured individual.
He's like a Charlie Rose.
Yeah, he has a public TV show where he talks about books.
Yeah.
So this is not a oblivious dumb man. This is a guy who kind of knows history and he knows culture, but he doesn't apply it to himself.
Still, his personal,
or how
very
he deals with his wife.
Interesting. So, what do you think about the ending, Tony? I mean,
the ending,
the very last shot.
Okay, well, we see two things after he goes to bed. We see the shot Kirk mentioned about, which kind of
dream.
depicts,
Basically, his dream.
Yeah. Presumably, it's a dream. However, it's shot in a very objective way. We see a dream sequence earlier in the movie, which is shot in a much more.
It's another hidden camera,
conventionally cinematic, nightmare-looking thing where the kid's approaching with the axe. But at the end of the movie, it's shot like another one of those surveillance tapes where we just see, and it plays out over it feels like a couple minutes. We just see Majid as a child being dragged away and being put in the car and driven away after the lies have been told, after he's being sent off. So And yeah, that does play a little long. I think I agree with Craig. It doesn't have to be. After we watch the whole movie, it feels a little bit like kind of an indulgence, or like Michael Haneke is just like, all right, keep it rolling. Let's take it. No, walk slower. We really let him sit in it. Let him sit in this moment. Yeah. But the very end of the movie, is a long shot of the front of Piero. What's the kid's name? Piero's school. You see kids. It's either the beginning or the ending of the day. And there's kids all around the front of the school, and Pierre walks out, and he's approached by the son of Majid, who walks up to him. This is hidden. And what I like about these really long shots is it puts us in the shoes of like someone who's paranoid, someone who's like kind of anxious.
Waldo?
Where's Waldo almost? There's this sense of just kind of something wrong, but we're not sure what. And he conjures this feeling so effortlessly here. And these really long shots, they train us to sort of search the frame. We're looking for something. We're looking for something that's wrong. So the whole movie's trained us to do this. And then in the final shot, over which the credits roll after we see this, we do see, if we're paying attention, the son of Majid and Piero talking. And we don't know about what. Which feels like a kind of a final like turn of the screws, or kind of a final like an element of, I guess it's again just like, this just continues. His son has now been roped into this. We don't know what they're talking about, but we know this, like, there's no resolution, basically. It continues. And now it's like, is Piero involved? Does he know about the tapes? To me, again, like, I don't really want to know. I don't think, it doesn't really matter. The point is just, there's no ending here. It just goes on because no resolution has been found. It affects the younger generation. So that, I think it really works as an ending for me. Even if it is a little bit smug. Even if it is a little bit like, you can picture him grinning in the edit.
Picture him pointing the finger.
I can picture him grinning the whole damn time.
Yeah, he
with his little camera.
I imagine him watching this with an audience at Cannes. How do you like this?
I imagine him looking at Kirk and going, "Oh God, he's gonna hate this."
I love it. He's gonna be so excited that people hate this movie. Which we can take issue with.
No, interesting. Definitely, I found it was a note of extreme foreboding.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was a bit afraid of
the end.
Son, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because the way they speak to each other,
it does look actually kind of friendly.
It look very amicable.
It goes like back and forth though. I mean, for me, I see it that way. Like I can't tell. It's purposefully great. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, whether it's a chance for them to repair the past or to continue it, I mean, we don't know, and that is the beauty of an ambiguous ending here.
Yeah.
And it works with the whole film.
Yeah. What I love about this movie also is we can talk about it for 32 minutes, and we never bring up, like, who sent the tapes. That's not 1 minute of this discussion was about who sent the tapes. And I don't think it needs to be.
That's for Roger Ebert.
That's for Roger Ebert to speculate. Roger Ebert has, like, a thing in his review, like, look at 17 minutes in, and you'll see something I do, and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't know. So,
it's a photo of Roger Ebert himself.
But, I think this is honestly, I don't say it's album, but I do think this is a masterpiece. I do think it is pretty powerful and cool, and I really dig. I feel this is a movie that makes me feel so intellectually stimulated. I feel like I'm being talked to like a grown-up, and I really like that. I really think that's so cool. And I think Haneke is a guy who's like, in a lot of ways, he's very indifferent to kind of like whether you like it, you have to kind of meet him halfway. And sometimes I think he goes too far with that, and he kind of rubs your nose in crap, or he wants you to like be uncomfortable. But in this movie, I think he finds the perfect balance of just kind of he's kind of holding you to, you know what I mean? He's making it tough, but he's also, I think he really cares too. There's an earnestness to it all. So I love this movie, and I think the more I talk about it, the more I like it. So we're at about 33 minutes now, so I think we can go into the voting. Kirk, how are you going to vote?
I vote no.
All right.
I'm just going to say that Kirk is like me after Barney in a state of just disrepair, withdrawn. Real quick, I just want to say the performances by Daniel Auteuil and Juliette Binoche are absolutely fascinating and great.
Binoche.
I feel like Juliette Binoche, I could hand her the play I wrote in the 2nd grade and she would add depth to it. That's how fascinating I am.
Very good.
Absolutely.
No, so this was a interesting movie for sure, and I know I sound very enthusiastic, so I think Tony's going to be surprised, but I'm going to have to go now.
No.
Do you care to elaborate at all? You just don't?
Yeah, I mean, I know, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I think it works pretty well within the context of what he's setting out to do. On a personal level, the issue of the philosophy and the one incident I did bring up, For me, I could understand that this is a pretty good film, and I know why it's recognized and critically received well. For me personally, it's doesn't quite work completely, so I'm gonna have to go no.
Fair enough. I've had similar responses to different movies. So.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I do think everyone who's has an interest should check it out at some point. Absolutely. It doesn't work for everyone, but
yeah, definitely a recommendation.
No, I mean not a super watchable movie, but just the fact we've been talking about it, or at least three of us have been talking about it, so in such an animated fashion, I think this has got to be a great movie. I think it surely belongs as one of the 706. Yeah, just very interesting.
All right. Well, I knew Anthony really could have gone either way. You could
another Tony snub. This is.
I really am. I'm 0 for 4 right now.
Yeah. This might be a regret. I'll give Tony that. But
no, it's fine. No. I've been in your shoes. I can't be mad about it. I can't be mad about it at all. So that's fine. I knew this would be kind of divisive, but again, I think super discussable. I'm very glad we watched it, and I just have the utmost kind of respect for this film. I do think it's, regardless of what I think of his other work, this is cemented Haneke in my eyes as a master. So let's move on to the kind of the fan favorite section, in which these guys pitched to me a movie to watch next week. Who went the least recently?
Kirk. No, it wasn't me.
You go. I mean, either one.
All right, Kirk, do you want to pitch the movie for next week?
Sure. I'm going to pitch Come and See. It's a 1985 war drama set in Belarus in World War II, following a young peasant child who's conscripted into the partisan army to fight the Germans.
All right, cool.
I guess I'll go. I really wanted to nominate some Godard or some Antonioni, but after watching this, and I feel like we might need to cool things down. So I'm going to take us back to the 1960s, 1968 in fact, and nominate what I consider one of the greatest action movies of all time, starring the King of Cool himself, Steve McQueen. And it is Bullet, directed by Peter Yates, in which a cop played by Steve McQueen aims to take down the local mob boss with the help of his criminal brother.
That's something I wish I'd suggested. As for me, I'm having trouble picking here. What the hell? Guillermo Pontecorvo's Battle of Algiers. You see it on tons of top 10 or top 100 movies lists. Very, very fucking cool movie. We can get into this whole French-Algerian thing, if you like.
Okay.
Very interesting, very crafty movie.
All right, very cool. 3 very interesting choices. I don't think we got a bad pick in the bunch, honestly. I feel spoiled for choice right now. But let's move on to the rebuttals. Kirk, what do you have to say about these options?
They're all valid choices.
What'd you pick again, Kirk?
I picked Come and See. So
all right.
This is how you know we broke it. He has no snappy rejoinder about the options. Why should we pick yours? Come on. What's yours above the others?
It's
give me something.
It's
I've never seen.
It's on the Sight and Sound 250. I think that matters to you. So
my heart just broke.
I've been in Kirk's shoes as well.
Lost the will to podcast.
Well, if we have another episode this upcoming week. In terms of Bullet, I do really think it's a classic film. I think its action scenes hold up well. It's a great example of practical effects. It's not. I could admit now it's not a dissectable or very analytical movie the way Caché is today.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a great entertainment movie. I think it holds up well, and I think everyone should see it at some point as well. So that's my choice. I have not seen either of Connor's or Kirk's.
Tony, have you seen Battle of Algiers? I think you have.
Oh, so I watched this movie in my Italian cinema course. This is a film school pick. I slept through probably 40% of it because my sleep schedule at that time was a nightmare. So basically, I slept through all these great Italian movies. So I'm going to go back and check it out. But yeah.
So yeah, I'll just say that it's, it is very discussable. It is kind of a provocative kind of movie. It was super provocative at the time. It's kind of the beginning of kind of post-colonial cinema. It's really interesting for that reason. It's still problematic in its own ways. We can still talk about it. It's not just a preachy, kind of movie. It's very ambiguous, very interesting, very historical. That's all I'll say about it, you know. As for the others, I haven't seen Come and See. I don't know what to say about it. As per Kirk's description, and as for Anthony, I think he said it himself. Probably not the most, not as intellectually stimulating. I think Bullet is a movie that I am very interested in. I'm very interested in that period of cinema. So. I like that. I like those kinds of movies a lot, but you know, maybe we wouldn't have as much to talk about. It would just be us kind of reminiscing about that
our 1960s days,
the summer of love.
Yeah.
The time we went to Woodstock.
Yeah, all our groovy times. So,
all right. So these are 3 great choices. The first one I'm gonna knock off the chopping block is Battle of Algiers because we're going right for I mean, I want to veer away from the film school kind of heaviness, I guess, after this week. I don't know. It's I'm really excited to dig into again. I want something a little more immediate, something a little, a tune that's a little catchier, perhaps, after this, just to mix it up. Bullet sounds like a lot of fun, but Come and See is a movie that I've seen a lot on this movie is so disturbing, dude. Like, you're never going to believe it, dude. And I always make it a priority to seek out such films. Also, I just feel really bad for Kirk. So I got to make
it. When Harry Met Sally.
I got to do it. No. That's what we wanted to see anyway. They're all good choices. No. So for all these reasons, I think Come and See is the rational choice. I mean, it's probably heavy as well.
Tony has his own Caché guilt. At least he's doing something.
I know, exactly.
How does
I'm
he
acknowledging
reconcile?
it. Are you happy, Haneke? Are you happy? See, I'm learning that lesson.
Does this mean I have to come back next week?
Oh,
you gotta come back. Or
we'll recast you, but you'll still be Kirk.
This movie has a beginning, middle, and end. You will not question reality.
Is this a
all right, you're gonna make me drop you, Kirk, if you're gonna crap on my movie.
Wait.
I don't know.
Is this a foreign movie, Kirk?
No, I'm not gonna.
It is. It's It's in Russian.
Okay,
Russian.
so very film
I love
schooly
Russian.
This is not. It's everything about it. Ostensibly looks like it's very film schooly-ish or whatever that is, and I know that feeling. But it's actually very digestible.
Well, most of our audience is film school kids.
And I think we'll have a lot to talk about. And hopefully by then the Wellbutrin will have kicked in that I'll be seeking out.
We'll all try to recover from this. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
Good.
No,
Thanks,
I
guys.
feel pretty happy about this. But yeah, I was happy with this film again. I really like it. So have a good week, everyone, and we'll be back with some Come and See.
Happy Hanukkah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 706 podcast. Before we get into this week's festivities, I do have something to sort of explain. Our podcasts are hosted on a website called hosted on a website called Podomatic.com. And for users on the website that don't pay, there is a limit. There's a 500 megabyte limit to what you can upload, which we have currently exceeded. Now, this is not something we get paid for, this podcast. The dog box money will really only go so far. So
I give my paycheck to charity, but
yeah, that's true. So we put it right back into the community. We don't put it into the show. So there's really we have no choice but to start pulling the early episodes. However, you can still hear those early episodes on our SoundCloud, which is still up and running. That is the 706 Podcast SoundCloud. So look us up there. And I think we're going to probably start, after a while, putting these up on YouTube, just because YouTube does not have any restrictions on how much content you can put up, at least as far as I know. I've never come across anything like that. So we're going to start putting the early episodes up on YouTube. But as of this week, the Spice World episode is no more, which is tragic.
Beginning of the end, folks. Beginning of the end.
So this week we have something special for you. It was originally going to be a competition of sorts between Kirk and I, but Kirk sort of bailed on us. He's off on his spring break adventure, which leaves it to Connor and I to kind of pick up the slack here. So what we decided to begin doing on this podcast is a segment where we do sort of a rap battle, and this is the very first one, and you may see these in the future, but
oh boy.
So we really don't know what we're going to be doing, and rap battles tend to have a little bit of salty language. As you can see, this is already an explicit rated episode, but if things get a little too salty, we're just going to bleep it out. So you may hear some bleeps coming very soon.
Grandma, I'm very sorry.
So may God have mercy on our souls. Would you like me to kick it off?
I would love for you to kick it off.
All right, I'm gonna play a beat. This is powerful and uplifting hip hop rap instrumental beat number 3, royalty free. This is by the producer MK Project. So without further ado,
it's a legendary MK Project knock we got here.
Let's begin. All right.
Yeah.
This is your boy Tony here on the 706 podcast. Our first annual rap battle. We'll probably do it more frequently than annually, but all right. All right.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Let's go.
The song goes out to my boy Michael Haneke. He celebrates every holiday, including Hanukkah. He made a movie called Caché. It is the I said shaded that. It is my I love that movie so much. Blasted in my crib 24/7 like Scarface in Spring Breakers. James Franco was my boy. He and Michael Haneke would get along, and then they'd sing a little song called Powerful and Uplifting Hip Hop Rap Instrumental Beat number 3. I gotta go pee, so I'ma get up and leave it to my boy Connor. His favorite movie is John Carter. Go.
My name's Connor. There's nobody finer. Yep. Uh-huh.
His favorite party is the party with the Donners.
I like to party.
He's got honors at school. He thinks
Honors.
he's really cool.
Connor.
Personally, I think he's a fool. And kind of a tool. Not the band, not the brand. His favorite service is sand. He's in high demand at the clubs where they sippin' bub. In the back rooms where they sippin' drugs. They sippin' drugs out of sippy cups. And they tip them in their tippy cups. This is my favorite podcast in the world. The 706 podcast. Alright, Connor, close us out. One more verse. This is it. This is for all the marbles. This is the one they're going to remember us for. This is the one. This is the final verse.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so bright, like a diamond in the blight. I make beats, not good. No, I make rhymes. I'm running out of time.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, being us playing this podcast in every bar. Oh, that was weak. The earth will inherit the meek. I got it flipped. Jesus had it right the first time. That was weak. That was. I'm a bloke. All right. That was our first rap battle.
That was our rap battle. More of a solo.
We may do another take on that one.
I'm gonna work on my freestyling, guys. You should have seen Kirk. He was pretty good, but of course he wanted to pre-write his rap, so
which is pretty weak.
Pretty weak.
Pretty whack, as we say in the hip hop community.
Yeah.
So all right, guys, we'll see you next week with what? Come and
see. Kirk's come and see.